Welcome to the NCO Journal Podcast, where we explore NCO professional development. This is a podcast series where we discuss published articles with authors and provide a forum for the open exchange of ideas, information, and solutions. I'm your host, Staff Sergeant Brandon Cox, Senior Editor of the NCO Journal. With us is Sergeant First Class Osvaldo Akite, the NCOIC of the NCO Journal. Today we discuss the article, Alcohol in the Army, a Toxic Relationship, with retired Command Sergeant Major Gabriel Arnold. He's a chair for the U.S. Department of Army Operations at the U.S. Army Sergeant Major's Academy. We also welcome special guests, Command Sergeant Major Justin Shad, the Director of Emergency Services for Fort Leavenworth, and Command Sergeant Major Jason Porras, the Army University Command Sergeant Major. Thank you for joining us. Before we kick things off, Sergeant Major Arnold, could you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Gabe Arnold. I'm a retired Command Sergeant Major. I did 32 years in the Army. Background is CBRN, and currently I work as a Army civilian professional as the chair of the Department of Army Operations, and that's pretty much me.
And with us is special guest, Sergeant Major Justin Shad.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sergeant Cox. Sergeant Major Shad, former brigade and battalion CSM here at Fort Leavenworth. My background is military police, and also I'm a recovering alcoholic of 26 years.
And Sergeant Major Jason Porras, can you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, Sergeant Major Jason Porras. I'm currently the Army University Sergeant Major. My brigade time was the Commandant of the NCO Academy up in J Bear, Alaska, and my battalion, I was a Special Troops Battalion Sergeant Major at Fort Bliss under 1st Armored Division.
Sergeant Major Arnold, what inspired you to write this article?
So the first significant event is I did receive a field grade Article 15 for a DUI in 1990 while stationed in Baumholder, Germany. That was the first time I had been in any trouble up until that point. Second, I've seen alcohol destroy some pretty strong military careers, both junior and senior. And I did continue to reflect upon how I behaved as a senior leader. And I think there were many times I can remember where I participated in glamorizing alcohol. And lastly, alcohol has also impacted several family members of mine. So those are the few reasons why I chose to write about alcohol and the Army.
You started off your article with saying that the issue with alcohol, and you bring up a lot of good points. You talk about how the Army is prone to using alcohol, that we're at risk for that. And so maybe if you can talk a little bit about why the Army is more at risk at being abusing alcohol.
Well, there's a few reasons. I mean, and there's many more than I'm going to talk about, but one, alcohol is both legal and very accessible. And though in my opinion, I don't think alcohol is as glamorized today than in the past, but it's still inadvertently glamorized. You know, a couple examples are military balls, socials, hail and farewells, icebreakers, within the barracks and housing. I'm not an expert, but folks do typically like the way it makes them feel and so when you're feeling good, you want to stay feeling good, so you keep on drinking. This can lead to increased tolerance, which leads to more drinking to achieve the buzz you're looking for, and then that could turn into alcoholism. I think how this affects the Army, I talked pretty specific in the article when I talked about the 2006 report, on the loss of work days and arrests and cost to the military overall. But one point I'll make is currently we are failing to meet our recruiting objectives, which makes retention even more important. Right now, I think the math is we only have 3 of 10 17 to 21-year-olds that qualify to join based on physical restrictions, medical and criminal histories. So, losing soldiers to alcohol abuse further threatens our ability to maintain an all-volunteer force.
Well said. Sergeant Major Shad, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Sergeant Cox. So I think, in the military, we have a different, regardless of what MOS or what your duty description is, we have a different type of stress that we deal with on a daily basis. And, Sergeant Major Arnold kind of hit on it too. Alcohol is legal, right, first and foremost. And, I can only speak from my experience and how alcohol affected my life for the many years that I drank. But, many times you see that in the Army, the social outlet that soldiers rely on, or soldiers get into, is hanging out, having a few beers, which is fine. Look, it's okay to, have a couple beers. However, when it becomes a problem and that couple beers turns into, a 12-pack plus, and then you have soldiers that find themselves in certain situations going down that road where it becomes, an addiction, right? And then it becomes self-destructing in a lot of different ways. So, alcohol is prevalent in and out of the Army. First and foremost, it's legal. And again, there's still, a lot of cases where soldiers use it as a stress outlet, right, to relieve stress. And then, at times for some folks, it turns into something that becomes harmful as the years go on.
Yeah, we have a lot of experience here in years in the Army. And maybe Sergeant Major Porras, I'll shoot this out to you if you want to talk a little bit about your experience and alcohol in the Army, as far as when did you first see it, or when was it, how often was it included in events and things like that?
I appreciate it, Sergeant Kite. So for me, I'll say first and foremost, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I stopped drinking about 4 years ago, which you do the math. I drank 20 years solid, 7 days a week, minus field exercises, deployments, and stuff like that. And I'll say that alcohol for myself, I can't speak for everybody, it was a coping mechanism for me. It's a way to de-stress. I'd get home, relax, have a couple drinks, and then, start off just, small drinking, small amounts, small quantities. And I think where the issue for myself is when I started to build up that tolerance. And then I became a very functioning alcoholic, a high-functioning alcoholic, where I'd have to drink a lot more than I did previously. And I realized couldn't afford to go out and drink, so I'd drink at the house. And all it really takes is one bad day. You add alcohol to just about any other event, and it can have a significant impact negatively on your career and those you lead and those that have invested in you. So I'll say that it's probably always been an issue. I appreciate what Sergeant Major Arnold said, that it's not as glamorized today as it has been in the past. I think that's correct. Previously, it's been one of those things where an event is kind of the focus is alcohol centered. A lot of times now it's not the case, but I would say it started off early when I first joined the Army. First interaction with fellow soldiers all involve some sort of alcohol. And then you start drinking socially, and then you build up that tolerance, you keep going, and then as you build up that tolerance, you got to drink more and more and more and more frequent to reach that buzz or reach whatever it is that you're trying to achieve and cope with. And, 1 or 2 drinks doesn't help you cope or relieve stress. And then you fall on that path, and I think over time it's just not good for your health, and it's not fair to your soldiers that you lead as well. So it's one of those things that you have to make that step to seek to get help, or you got to make that step to consciously decide to quit or reduce alcohol consumption. I chose to quit on my own. I didn't seek help. Luckily for me, my spouse doesn't drink, and I'd say that's the one reason I'm able to maintain where I'm at today. But during those 4 years, I have drank, and I'd say those have been mostly military-oriented events where alcohol was a focus, and I would, have 1 or 2 drinks, or hold a beer and milk it the whole night, so I didn't get asked or pressured into drinking. So that was my experience.
Yeah, so there's a responsibility here that leaders have, introducing or maybe choosing what kind of drinks they have at certain events. And so that's what another thing that Sergeant Major Arnold, you mentioned in your article here, is that, leaders need to take an active approach into not glamorizing alcohol. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Where I was going with that is just, not definitely making an effort to not make the focus centered on alcohol. I've been to senior leaders' house, and I'm guilty of this as well, where they'll hold a social at their house, and from the battalion level all the way to the division level. When I was a post CSM at Fort Knox, I mean, about 90% of the time, the focal point when I would go over senior leaders' house and when I would host would be alcohol. I'm talking about beer, wine, liquor, and I mean plenty of it. So, I think it would help overall to not sponsor events like that. Even though, as Sergeant Major Shad said, it's fun getting together and having a couple beers. But the problem is is when folks don't set parameters and things get out of control and the problem grows, and it's a readiness issue.
What can junior soldiers do to make a change?
A couple of things, and I'm not trying to sound like, I know everything, but this would be a couple of pieces of advice. One, I think it starts with junior leaders basically abstaining from drinking in front of their soldiers, or telling stories about how drunk they've gotten in the past. If a junior leader is going to decide to drink in front of their soldiers and it has one or two drinks, don't make it a point to immediately go out to your car and drive away. That's, again, sets a bad example. I think junior leaders need to maintain a bit of professional separation with their soldiers. And this does not mean you cannot joke around or laugh or eat together, et cetera, but I would abstain from throwing barbecues at your house and providing or allowing the consumption of alcohol as the focus. So that would be a couple pieces of advice on that.
Sergeant Major Shad, with your experience, what would you recommend for junior enlisted?
Yeah, I think spot on by Sergeant Major Arnold. But I think, for me, I look at it as just being transparent, right? So, I still encounter, I encountered in my last two duty positions where, a lot of incidents that took place, when it came to readiness and when it came to indiscipline, alcohol was a common denominator, right? And, I think in the Army, we still have an issue with, that young team leader maybe, drinking, right, with his soldiers at times, right? And that's the kind of stuff that we need to get after, right? Sergeant Major Arnold said it too, is you hear a lot of times I've heard soldiers telling what I would call war stories, right? Telling about, stories back, stories that had alcohol involved, or, a story of when they were at a bar or a club with fellow soldiers and, alcohol was involved and something happened. But, it takes that one leader, just like it took back in 1996 when I was a private, to have the intestinal fortitude to stand up and say, hey, man, this is not right. And the fraternization piece is a whole other topic, of course, but I think that's still something we battle in the Army, and I think we always will. It's a human nature thing, right? And we've been talking about it for the 27 years that I've been in the Army, and it's just what it is. But, I think at times soldiers feel pressure, right? So that young soldier, per se, that comes into the Army and he finds himself hanging out with his young NCO, and everyone's drinking and he's the odd guy or girl out because he doesn't drink much, or he may not drink at all. They may not drink at all. They might find themselves quickly grabbing that beer, right, just to fit into that social circle, that social norm. And that's something that, that young leaders need to kind of, get after. Not putting that peer pressure is what I call it on some folks to, reach out and grab that beer, or seeing that battle buddy that, drinks too much, right? It's pretty obvious when someone's drinking a little too much or, getting a little out of control to kind of police them up. It's easier said than done. I get it. It's easy to sit here and say that, but to put it in the action is something that's easier said than done.
Yeah, it sounds like from what I'm hearing here, it says alcohol itself is not the problem here. I think it's the going to that as a stress reliever, or building a tolerance to it, or seeing that as a way to fit in. So it's maybe just the use of it and the abuse of it. For our young NCOs out there, what are some of the things that they can look out for to see if somebody is being abusive of that alcohol?
Hey, I'll jump on that, sir. So for me, and I can only speak for myself again, and I won't get long-winded with my whole story. There's a couple articles out, but I don't. First and foremost, listen, I don't blame the Army. No one in the Army ever told me or gave me an order that I had to take a drink of alcohol. Right? I don't blame the Army for my alcoholism. However, what was interesting in my situation was, I sought help as a sitting brigade CSM. And I don't say that to brag. I don't say that for, any of that stuff. What I say that for is one thing, I learned a lot through the process. And one thing that was interesting to me was when I came out and made it pretty public that I was seeking help for my alcoholism, there was many folks, and I say many, there was many folks that, word got back to me that I'd served with through the years, from back when I was a young E5, young staff sergeant, And these folks are senior folks now that made comments such as, we knew he had a problem for years. We knew he drank too much. And I don't blame those leaders. I don't any way, shape, or form blame those leaders. However, and I'm guilty of this too, why didn't they say something at the time? I don't know. Would that have stopped me from drinking? No. Right? So to answer the question is, first and foremost, identifying those soldiers that are taking part in that high risk behavior, that are abusing alcohol, right? And approaching or having that conversation with them. And that's uncomfortable at times, right? But that's something you need to do, because that's the prevention piece. At the end of the day, you may end up saving that soldier's life, or you may end up, talking to the soldier and realizing, hey, the reason they're drinking, right, is because of X, Y, and Z, and you're going to uncover, that they're having family issues or financial issues or whatever the case may be, and you get left to the boom with some issues that your soldiers are having. So the bottom line really is, and again, in my experience, a lot of folks knew that I was the life of the party, I guess, per se, right? But that's what I was known as, and that was. And when I got help, there was folks that were like, well, yeah, I mean, we all knew that. But, you got to have the courage to as a young leader to say, hey, pull your young soldiers aside and have that conversation. Like, look, man, you were drinking a lot, X, Y, and Z, and you'd be amazed what you learn.
What was the point in time that gave you the courage to seek help for yourself?
Yeah, Sergeant Cox, I've been asked that question several times, and that's a great question. So, again, not to get too long-winded, but, a lot of folks talk about rock bottom and, situation. We see a lot of soldiers reach out for help after the fact, right? After the fact of they got a DUI or drunk on duty, and then, hey, I got to go to ASAP, SUDC, and get help. For me, it was a series of events, right? I didn't get in any trouble per se, but I was self-destructing. I drank for so long that it was starting to have some serious impacts on my marriage, my professional career, and my health, quite honestly. So I have no really cool story to say, hey, X, Y, and Z happened and I went to seek help. But what I can tell you is there was a series of things over years and years that finally got me to reach out to get help, and at the end of the day, it saved my life.
I want to chime in real fast if I can. So I want to take a moment to recognize Sergeant Major Shad and him stepping up to get help. One thing that I think that there's an issue with, and it's not an Army issue, it's an individual issue. I quit drinking as well as a Sergeant Major. So when I was in position as a Sergeant Major, so did Sergeant Major Shad. And I'll say that I chose not to seek help through the Army system, SUDC, or anything like that. And the reason I chose not to do that is I felt the position I was in was too important, too significant. I was scared to seek help in that position. So I quit on my own. And for a guy that's in a sitting brigade CSM position to go out and seek help, I think that speaks volumes. And my point of this is I hope that people listening, whether you're a squad leader, team leader, first sergeant, platoon sergeant, your job is not too important to seek help, because you owe it to the soldiers, your future soldiers, your current soldiers that you're going to lead at higher levels or at the level you're currently leading at, to go get that help at the time. Looking back, I wish I'd got help. I wish I'd have taken that step and said, hey, look, I got it. I'm a sergeant major. Important in my own eyes, right? Too important to actually leave and get that help. So I chose to do it on my own. Significantly harder. I wouldn't say harder. It's not easy to quit drinking regardless if you're doing. But without a support system, I could see a lot of people failing at doing it. Again, as I said earlier, my wife doesn't drink, so that was huge for me. If I was surrounded by people who did drink and I didn't have a support system, I think I would have failed. So I just want to recognize Sergeant Major Shad for taking that big step and showing people what right looks like, and hopefully they go out and seek help too. And if we get one or two soldiers to quit drinking or, to get it under control, I think today's podcast is a success.
So there are signs, right? There are signs. Sergeant Major Porras, you mentioned being a functioning alcoholic, but there are some signs that you can, that you can see from a soldier, from somebody's behavior. You can see that they're abusing alcohol. Sergeant Major Shad, you mentioned problems with relationships and things like that. But what are some of those signs, and what could NCOs out there pick up on that may kind of give them a hint that somebody's abusing alcohol? I'll throw it out to Sergeant Major Porras.
Yeah, for me, so I would say, first and foremost, alcohol is the easy button. When you're looking at coping, alcohol is, like we stated earlier, it's legal, easily accessible. So for you to say, hey, I'm gonna use this as a coping mechanism, and you're gonna start drinking, people that drink a lot, they tend to talk about it. Like we talked about, you tell the cool war stories about what you did last weekend. So when people start sharing stories weekend after weekend after weekend, or during the week, it's time to say, hey man, are you okay? Do you have any other outlet, or is that your sole outlet? That's the experience I had. It's not hard to find someone who drinks alcohol and maybe has a problem because they state it quite a bit. The scary part is the people that you don't know that have a problem. The people, I don't want to say closet drinkers, but those people that hide it well. Those are a little more hard to find, and those people are just as much at risk. But I would say a lot of the people that have a drinking problem openly talk about it. Sergeant Major Arnold, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm really enjoying what you guys have to say. And I also appreciate Sergeant Major Shad's comment about not blaming the Army. Yeah, blaming the Army organization as a whole, that's not what the responsibility lies. Yeah, I think that it's my opinion that the greatest weapon a senior leader can have or a junior leader can have, as far as let's say detecting signs of alcoholism, is to know their soldiers. And so, defining exactly what that looks like is difficult. We do a lot of texting, we do emailing, we do social media, and all those platforms I think are good. That's just the way things are. But we also have to spend some time and put in some effort with face-to-face trying to get to know our people. I think that is our greatest weapon as it relates to being able to detect a possible issue and stop it before it becomes a problem.
I think it's important to define one of the things that you focus on in your article here. One of the main focuses of your article, Mr. Arnold, is the glamorization. I think defining that. What do you mean exactly by glamorizing alcohol?
It's centering the focus on alcohol, meaning one, as a junior soldier. This is an example of glamorizing alcohol. So, same duty station, Baumholder, Germany, as a young private. I was 19 years old. I had drank in high school. At the time in Germany, they had not moved the age limit up to 21 yet. So, I just kind of picked up where I left off. And we'd go out to Grafenwehr, once every quarter or 6 months. I can't remember. And I was with an artillery unit. So we'd go out there to train. And the typical battle rhythm had us going out to the field for about 5 days and coming back for 2 days to recover. And when we'd come back in for recovery and we were done with that first day, what would happen is the S4 would buy just a ton of beer. And we would use the hard stand that we used for the dining facility when we were in the rear to basically, congregate and, try to have a lot of fun, drink a lot, dominoes, spades, and what have you. But what was significant is, at the time, the battery first sergeant would put the battery in a mass formation and march every single soldier to the beer tent. Now, I'm not trying to say that like that's heinous, but that definitely is glamorizing alcohol, in my opinion. I didn't think about it when I was young, but yeah. So, as a senior leader, again, battalion through division level, it's senior leaders conducting these socials and, again, making alcohol kind of the focus of the event, if you would. Those are a couple of examples of what glamorizing alcohol means to me.
I'll add on to that, too, what Sergeant Major Arnold was talking about, in my opinion. So, and I'm guilty of this, right, before I got help from alcoholism. So a good example when I look at or hear people say glamorizing alcohol, and again, this is from my experience, is let's say you have a battalion level event, and let's be honest, folks will start to have a few beers, right? And from my experience, a lot of folks are quick to ask the question, hey, why doesn't First Sergeant Shad drink? Or, hey, man, you want a beer? And you kind of can watch the non-drinker, as the night goes on, kind of do what they have to do, shake hands with who they have to shake hands with, and check the block that they were at that event and leave. And again, from my experience, then as the night goes on, it becomes a drunk fest, right? It becomes the people, the folks, the senior folks, and this was me, right, that drank along with the other senior NCOs and officers, staying and continuing to drink. And folks see that, right? Because those stories spread. It doesn't take long, you start hearing stories about how the battalion sergeant major was there drinking until the wee hours of the night with X, Y, and Z. And that's just one example of how at times I think that alcohol is glamorized. It's interesting now that I find myself in situations since I've quit drinking, and most folks know that I don't drink. A lot of folks know my story, and that's great, right? But I've been in a few situations where they don't know my story, and it's like, hey, what's up with this guy? He doesn't drink, just like I would have done when I was drinking, kind of like that, that saying, hey, you don't trust anybody that doesn't drink. You become the odd guy or odd girl out, and I've never felt that before, right? Until I quit drinking. So now I kind of see from the other side how some folks have felt, non-drinkers, let's say, or people that could just drink socially, all right? How some of those folks have felt in those social situations throughout their careers.
Yeah, just saying things like that, just saying things like, I don't trust anybody that doesn't drink, is glamorizing alcohol, right? It's saying that there is a specific circle of trust kind of among people that do drink, kind of glamorizes that alcohol. So I think those are pretty good examples of what leaders can do at a minimal level to like bigger, hosting of events and things. But I think the biggest takeaway is not taking those signs that we see, not seeing those conversations happening around the water cooler kind of thing and taking them lightly, and then maybe approaching them is what NCOs can do directly to kind of stop somebody from reaching having those stories of I destroyed my career and things like that.
Yeah, and it goes back, Sergeant Major Shad, again, it goes back to what Sergeant Major Arnold said, knowing your soldiers, right? And I've heard that my whole career, like we all have, right? And I'm guilty of it, okay? So, take a prime example would be a soldier has a domestic with his spouse, okay? And alcohol's involved. Well, the team leader, squad leader's never even been to that soldier's place of residence or their quarters. So, the first time they're stepping foot into that soldier's quarters is when something bad happens. And as they enter that quarters, they see, a refrigerator full of booze and and they're like, wow, hey, this guy might have a drinking problem, right? Now they may have been able to get ahead of that if they would have known that that soldier had an issue. They might have gotten ahead of that if they actually had been to that soldier's place of residence and saw that, right? Because if we look at, again, indiscipline across the Army and, some of the things that the Army's trying to get after, alcohol is a factor in a lot of indiscipline that takes part across the Army.
Is it getting harder to see those signs? So, in my experience, back when I was a private specialist or whatever, we had rooms, the old World War II barracks kind of things. We had 2 people per room in bunk beds, and you had a mass shower and kitchen, and not even a kitchen, right? Microwave area. But it was easier to go into different soldiers' rooms and seeing, what they had in their trash and things like that. You can see bottles being piled up and things like that. But now, with these barracks being individual rooms, closed off, harder to go in there. Is it getting harder to identify or see some of these signs, do you think, Sergeant Major?
No, I don't think it is. I think it comes down to, if your soldiers respect you and they respect you as a person first and a leader, they're going to be transparent, and that's just my opinion. But what I will say, too, is a lot of what I would call true alcoholics, and again, I'm speaking for myself here. Please don't take any of this out of context. If my leaders would have came in my room when I was a young soldier drinking, there would be no alcohol in my room because I drank it the night prior. It'd be in my trash can, right? But really, to answer your question, no, I don't think it's any harder. I think some leaders use that as an excuse or use the social media They depend too much. We got to get back to, and this is not just alcohol related, of course, but we got to get back to, like Sergeant Major Arnold stated, face-to-face contact, eyeball to eyeball, instead of using social media.
So I think the main takeaway is it's never too late to get help. You need to find those things early on in soldiers that could be a red flag. What's something that you either would have told yourself when you realized you had a problem, or what is the thing that you would tell to the soldier you see today that you think might have a problem?
What I would say to that is, quite simply, get help, right? Get help and there's no stigma in reaching out for help. And when I say help, I'm talking for alcoholism, mental health, or anything else that you're facing. Because look, everybody, and I learned this from one of my bosses, one of my old brigade commanders that I work for, he used to say this, and it's true. Everybody's going to face something in life that they can't handle on their own, right? And if you haven't yet, you will, right? And you need to have the courage, and you need to have that humility to reach out for help, because there's no stigma in doing that. So the first part of it is to get help. The second part, and this is kind of off the question, is I think we need, as a collective, across the Army, we need to do better with getting the message out there when it comes to alcohol. We do great when it comes to a lot of things, and we've come a long way when it comes to getting after what we're calling corrosives. I think with alcohol, sometimes it's hand-waved. I think there's work that needs to be done. I think we need to start taking folks at all levels who have personal issues, or personal struggles with addiction, and start using those folks to come out and talk. Because I'll tell you one thing, I don't think there was any alcohol class that I sat through as a young soldier that would have got me to quit drinking. In fact, I tell you, no, absolutely not. However, like Sergeant Major Porras said, I think if a recovering alcoholic would have came in and gave a class, or someone who struggled, however you want to call it, I say recovering alcoholic because that's what I am, came in and told their story, their personal story, that goes a hell of a lot farther with folks than and I'm sorry if I offend anybody, than somebody that's not an alcoholic standing up there flipping through slides, right? And that's just, I think we need to do better at that. So if you're struggling, my message to you is, it doesn't matter what rank you wear on your chest. It doesn't matter what position you're in. Get help now. Get help. There's no stigma in getting help. Get help before it's too late. Before you kill yourself, kill somebody else, or lose everything you worked so hard, including your marriage and so on and so forth.
Sergeant Major Arnold, do you have anything to add on to that?
If there's anything to add, it would be, some of the regrets I have personally as a leader when I was still in uniform. And, there was times, what I regret is setting a poor example when it comes to drinking. Well, I can't take it back, but at least I can write about it now and not set a bad example going forward. I'm still connected to the military, so that's my goal.
Sergeant Major Porras?
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is being in a leadership position, no matter where you're at, what level, soldiers kind of want to be like you, and there's strength in numbers, and people want to emulate what you do. And looking back, very much like Sergeant Major Arnold said, I wish I set a poor example. I wish I would have done it differently. I wish the example I would have set was strong enough to get help, strong enough to quit, still be the life of the party, but being sober when I do it, setting that example where you don't need that to fit in. And that's why I'm here today. When Sergeant Major Shad was coming on, I'm his battle buddy. Me and him went classmates, class 66 for the Sergeant's Major Academy. He's a friend of mine. I know he's going through struggles. I am as well. So there's strength in numbers, and someone that you can relate to, talk to, share those things, and other soldiers can come to us at any time and talk to us about it. And we would share what we have what we've experienced, what we went through. And I think just setting that example in a positive manner rather than in a negative manner, for me, looking back, I would have done that. I would have got help earlier, knowing that my influence may have negatively impacted someone else along my career path. So I think that's what I would have done different.
As kind of a final question, I wanted to go around the room and ask from the three sergeant majors if you guys have a recommendation or an approach to change.
I think really we've talked about the things I think that need to happen in order for some greater change to occur. One is, both junior and senior leaders setting a better example, doing anything they can to not glamorize alcohol, and then adjusting the culture, making it okay to seek help. And I think we've come a long way with that, especially behavioral health type issues. Alcoholism has got to fit in there too, and we got to talk about it. We got to encourage folks to get help that need help. That it really starts at the top, in my opinion. But senior leaders got to lead the way on this, and it should trickle down all the way down to the lowest level, in my opinion.
Sergeant Major Porras?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm going to be a little bit harsh when I say this. I think the Army's quick at reacting to the issue at hand. For example, we have a SHARP violation, a suicide, something of that nature. What do we get? We get a whole bunch of SHARP briefings. We get a whole bunch of suicide briefings. We go through mandatory training. We sit through all that. We're not always getting to the root cause. And I will say that alcohol oftentimes is the root cause. And instead of focusing on those other things, you find out that the person that committed X offense was also under the influence of alcohol. Not all times, but usually it's not one event or it's not one infraction. It's a multitude of things. So rather than reacting to the situation at hand, I'm not saying we don't address it. We certainly address it, but we cover all the, different factors that went into why that infraction occurred, whether that's a suicide, SHARP violation, whatever the case may be, looking at their root cause. And I think alcohol is almost always a contributing factor to those things. Most people don't make poor decisions when they're in the right frame of mind. And the easiest, most accessible thing to get them out of the right frame of mind is the abuse of alcohol. And I think most of the times when you look at those things, there's some kind of alcohol-related incident on top of whatever else they're doing. So getting to the root cause and addressing alcoholism as a focus equal to, if not more important than some of those other big Army issues, I think is important.
In previous question, a recommendation for change. Sergeant Major Shad, did you have something?
Yeah, thanks, Sergeant Cox. So, this hopefully doesn't come out arrogant, but change starts with me, and change starts with every leader. And when I say leader, I'm talking from a day one private to, the chief of staff of the Army. Really, right? Everyone's a leader, and what I mean by that is, listen, I guarantee it that I promoted alcohol for many, many years in many, many positions in my career. And so, me coming out with my story and coming out with, my recovery story really, it goes back to what Sergeant Major Porras said, is if I can help one soldier or civilian who's battling addiction, if I could reach one person, one soldier that gets the courage to step forward and get the help that he or she may need, then I've done my job. And what I ask other leaders to do is to do the same. If you're struggling with addiction or mental health, struggles, etc., get help. Because not only are you doing yourself a favor by getting help, and your family and your teammates, etc., you're setting that example for generations to come that, hey, it really is okay, because we hear that a lot, but we don't always see it, right? And I understand some folks are quiet. I'm really vocal about my recovery, and I do it as a way to give back to those that are struggling, because I promoted alcohol for so many years in my career, in my life. So really, just you become the change, and you put it in action.
If I could, one closing comment, Sergeant Cox. I talked about earlier how there's no position that's too important where you can't be out. I'm going to say this. If you think you're struggling and you think you need help, it's important to get help, as Sergeant Major Shad said. I'd say if you're struggling and you're on the fence and you don't know if you should take that step forward to go get help, look at what's most important to you in life, whether that's your wife, your kids, your soldiers, whatever that is. Look at the most significant thing in your life, and then compare it to that alcohol and see if you're willing to risk it to continue that path. Not saying that something bad's going to happen, but if something bad did happen, you're kind of sacrificing what's important to you, the most important thing, for something that probably isn't the most important to you. So prioritize your life and get help if you need it.
If you feel like you need help, contact the Army Substance Abuse Program. For active Army soldiers, the number is 703-681-6452. For Army Reservists, 910-570-5555. 8296. And for National Guard soldiers, 803-513-0122.